If you, like so many others, agree that our American civilization is in decline and becoming more dysfunctional by the day, and you also agree that it is due to a corrupt and dysfunctional government, then like many others, you have probably asked, what can be done to correct our system to restore integrity to our nation? Unfortunately, that is not a simple, but a manyfold and complex question with many aspects and parameters to consider. However, the answers are not as complicated as you might expect, if you are willing to open your mind and relearn some of the fundamental foundational principles of civilization. These are really principles which previous generations of Americans knew and observed, but which we have forgotten. As simply and judiciously as possible, we are going to lay out some of these principles that will shed some light on the answers to that question, and hopefully correct many of the misconceptions which have crept upon us in the last few generations. Much of the material presented here will be unfamiliar to you, as it is not rehashed political rhetoric, which has been so instrumental in bringing our nation to the brink at which we find ourselves today. To fully comprehend the big picture, it is vital that you watch and study the presentation to completion with an open mind, as you may hear things that may be at odds with traditional beliefs and much of the false ideas with which we have been indoctrinated. A few simple questions and a little background is in order first. We start with a simple question. Where does the institution of ownership come from? Meaning, how is it that we can own something? The answer is that ownership is a civil construct dating back for millennia and is one of the pillars of civilization. Americans are seemingly very familiar with some important aspects of ownership, yet quite ignorant of others. Speaking of America, who owns our nation? I just said it. It is our nation. It belongs to us, the American people. But how? And why is answering that question important? The why of its importance stems from the realization that comes from considering that which is unacceptable, but which is being asserted in a massive way. That the government, elitist members of society, corporations, and foreign entities actually own our nation as opposed to the people. However, we will show why that is not the case. We the people own the nation. The answer to the question of how we the people can own our nation proceeds forth from the right of conquest. The right of conquest has been an accepted civil construct or principle of Western civilization for millennia as it applies today, and is the basis for property rights. We own our nation just as assuredly as we own anything, because we created it. You may believe that this statement is common sense. Yes, of course we own our nation. But that does not square with the current perception or what our population has been programmed to believe in the preceding 100 years or so. The common belief that all of us are simply guests in our own land, and as guests, we are subject to certain terms and conditions. It is the view that our nation is like a vacation amusement park or a hotel. Everyone that occupies space in the land are all the same, and no one really owns it. So we are all bound to obey the rules laid down by the management. This view is at complete odds with the concept of ownership by we the people. The reality is we are owners with complete and total rights. We are not guests in our own land. The nation and everything in it was created by us, and it exists strictly to serve the interests and the benefit of the owners. In absolute terms, our nation has no other reason to exist, and apart from this purpose, it cannot exist. Who are we the people? The concept of we the people, the masses of Americans who speak as one, whose interests are supreme, is defined by the ownership of the nation. It is for us that our nation came into being. Our nation is our house. It is the land within our borders and the people. So how is that different from what we call the American civilization? The American civilization stems from and refers to how we organize and run our nation, its structure of governance and procedure. We the people have been around since the very beginning. We the people founded our nation and lived in it for 200 years before we created the U.S. Constitution, which created the government, which was established as a republic we call the United States of America, which is a temporary and artificial fictional entity called a corporation. The U.S. Constitution did not establish our nation, nor does it constitute the nation. It merely constitutes the American Republic. The important thing to notice is the political food chain, or the chain of authority. We the people established and created the nation. We then created the states. 200 years after founding our nation, the existing states created the Constitution, which established the Republic government. We the people are above all of it. The established federal government, all state governments, and the Constitution are way down on the food chain. The political food chain dictates that we the people can reorder our house anytime we desire and in any fashion we wish. Why? Because it all started with us, and the power it wields emanates from us. Therefore, it is ours to do with what we may. So why don't we do that? Why don't we change the corrupt and dysfunctional state we are in?